This is Building Resilience Podcast, episode 200, Expectations. Welcome to Building Resilience, a podcast where theory, practical strategies, and inspiring stories show you how to unlock your best life. I'm your host, Leah Davidson. As a certified life coach, speech-language pathologist, and nervous system resilience expert, it is my mission to teach you how to be more resilient to life's adversities. I will show you how to manage your mind, befriend your nervous system, process your emotions, and even eliminate stress. It's time to do more than just survive. It's time to thrive. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Building Resilience Podcast. And before I get started, I want to stop and celebrate for a moment. We are celebrating episode 200. Can you believe it? I remember coming up with the idea of the podcast. I actually started this podcast, as I'm sure you're aware if you've gone back and listened to it, the beginning of the episodes, with my business partner at the time. And when we decided to go our separate ways, I had to make the decision of whether I would do it alone or not. And it was a big decision, firstly, because there's a financial cost to the podcast. So I was a bit concerned about that. Then there was a massive time investment. There was, the time to record, the time for me to research and do all the things that I like doing behind the scenes for the podcast. And of course, I did worry about what people would think, lots of mind drama about that. But I decided to just go for it. And I am so glad that I did. I have learned so much. I love to do the research. I love to prep. I love to share so many things. I've connected with so many of you. I love hearing from you. I love getting emails from people where they share that a certain episode resonates with them or that they enjoyed something. I, of course, love it if you leave a review and share the podcast with your friends. And I love how people all over the world are listening. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for connecting. Thanks for being gracious enough with all my mistakes and quirks. And thank you for being in my world. Now, this experience has been really more than I ever could have imagined or ever expected, which is what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit cheesy, but there you go. Today, we're diving into a topic that we all experience, but we don't usually stop and consider and examine it a little bit deeper, the role of expectations. And it's a topic that I talk a lot about with my clients. It really does come up a lot. And we will talk specifically about why it comes up so much in a bit. But first, I want to talk about the good and the bad of expectations, because expectations are kind of like a double-edged sword. They have the power to drive us forward, but they can also lead us to a lot of disappointment and stress. So I want to start by exploring both sides. Now, on the good side of expectations, why we have them or why we think it's good to have them, why they can be helpful, is firstly, I think expectations, they do give us a clear vision of where we want to go. They set the bar and they drive us to take action. And when you reach a goal or when you expect to reach a goal, it can really motivate you to push through the challenges that you have. For example, if you are expecting to get a promotion at work, that expectation can fuel your dedication and your hard work. Often it's said that we rise to the level of how high our expectations are. Now, expectations, they can also help set standards for ourselves and for others. And think about it. When you have expectations about how you want to be treated, whether you expect to be treated with respect, you're less likely to tolerate bad behavior. And it's like setting a boundary that says, this is how I deserve to be treated. This is the bar that I'm setting. And I think of parenting and using expectations. I do believe that we do rise to the level of expectations placed upon us. So if kids have no expectations placed upon them, they sometimes will just not rise to the challenge because they don't have to. They don't have anything that is stretching them, that they're reaching for. Now, of course, we're going to touch on the downside of expectations on kids, but I will say that I do think it's important that there are some expectations for our kids because they're growing up and we are their guides and their teachers. They are under our stewardship, and I think having expectations can help our kids grow and challenge themselves to win and learn and to build resilience. Now, thirdly, expectations, they can actually build anticipation and excitement as well. Kind of like waiting for a holiday or a big event or a trip, a family reunion with loved ones. These expectations create a sense of joy and anticipation that really can make your life more enjoyable. I think of the expectations and the anticipation that I have of upcoming travel. Now, some of you might already know that next year I'm hosting a retreat in Italy. It's completely sold out in case you're interested or excited and you want to join. Hopefully, I'll do other retreats in the future, but this one is sold out. But it's so fun anticipating and setting some expectations for what it's going to be like, because often what we expect, we get. So I expect that it's going to be amazing, and it is much more likely that I will create that amazing experience for myself. So it can work really well to tell the brain to aim high, find the good, expect the best. Now, let's talk about the downside of expectations. When you expect yourself to always be perfect or to hit every goal, it actually creates a lot of unnecessary stress and anxiety. And let's be real, our nervous system does not like that stress and anxiety due to that pressure. And so it will get triggered into that stress response. It's going to make it hard for you to feel calm and be present when you have high or unrealistic expectations. Back to that parenting example, expectations can place a lot of pressure on our kids, and their nervous systems may not be able to take it. So it's something to consider. What kind of strain or chronic stress am I putting on myself or others because of the expectations? Now, another way that they could be not so great is they can close you off to new possibilities. Because expectations can limit our ability to see new opportunities. When we're so fixated on a specific outcome, we might actually miss out on something even better that's right there in front of us. So have you ever planned a day with really high expectations, and when things don't go exactly as you imagined, you felt like the whole day was a flop? Well, maybe if you just let go of that rigid expectation, you would have seen how beautiful the unexpected detour really was. So back to my example with Italy. I'm pretty sure that not everything is going to be as perfect and magical as I'm imagining. Maybe it's going to be even better. Maybe it's going to be better than the ways I have imagined. And lastly, of the ones that I'm going to talk about, because I'm sure there's many more pros, many more cons, having expectations can lead to disappointment. And even more than disappointment, they can lead to suffering. And this is a conversation I often have with my clients. And I'm going to go much deeper into this one because I think it is the most common downfall or challenge that we see with expectations. So there's a common saying, I'm not sure who said it, but it goes like this. When reality doesn't match our expectations, we suffer. And I also think it's Byron Katie who says something like, when you fight with reality, you lose 100% of the time. So why is that? Well, expectations, they create like a mental image of how things should be. And when life doesn't align with this picture, it really can trigger feelings of frustration and disappointment and sadness or anger. So then there's this disconnect between the expectation and the reality, and it is a major source of suffering. And it's because often our nervous system interprets the suffering, interprets the disconnect as a threat, and it throws us into a state of stress and anxiety. If we are constantly pushing our expectations and they're not being met, we're constantly then being activated. And we know long-term that there are consequences to that level of activation. When we have expectations, we set up an attachment to a specific outcome. And the brain becomes wired to believe that things will unfold in a certain way. And when reality deviates from that, it feels like a shock or even a betrayal. It's not fair. It shouldn't happen this way. It's unexpected. The nervous system perceives this mismatch as being unsafe. We experience discomfort and pain. And that is what happens when we're activated. This state of activation then makes it even harder for us to regulate our emotions, which leads to even more increased suffering. And of course, harder to access our CEO, which is the area of the brain that helps us navigate our disappointments. So let's look at a couple of examples. So in relationships, suppose you expect your partner to remember your anniversary with an elaborate surprise, but instead, They forget the date entirely. The reality didn't meet your expectation, and you're left feeling hurt and unimportant. And it's not just about the missed celebration. It really is about the gap between what you imagined and what actually happened. Or maybe in your job, maybe you're expecting a promotion after years of dedicating yourself, the hard work, but somebody else gets chosen instead. And the disappointment can be pretty intense. And this is because you had a specific outcome in mind and it didn't manifest, and the experience left you feeling that it's unfair, or maybe you feel inadequate. Maybe with health goals, you set a goal to lose a certain amount of weight and you put in the effort, you eat right, you exercise, and you expect to see significant results. When you step on the scale and you don't see much change, be discouraging. The suffering here comes from the expectation that your hard work should be rewarded in a specific way. And I see this a lot with my SLP clients. Their accidents happen. They suffered an injury. It should not have happened. They should be getting better faster. Their team should be responding in a certain way. And if that reality doesn't match what the expectation is, it can be intensely disappointing. So we can experience this sense of loss because when expectations aren't met, it's as if we lose something that we thought we already had, whether it's an imagined experience, recognition, or even an outcome. And when reality doesn't align with our expectations, we resist accepting what actually is happening, which further creates inner turmoil and tension. Now, I do want to point out, suffering doesn't come from reality itself. It comes from the attachment to how we think things should be, and it often comes from trying to control the uncontrollables. We try to control the circumstances, situations, other people, the past. We try to control things that are outside of our locus of control. So I want you to stop and ask yourself, where are you trying to control what is uncontrollable? What reality are you fighting with? And then see if your suffering, your disappointment, your anger is stemming from this mismatch. And I think a lot of the time you'll see that that's where it's stemming from. All right, so where does that leave us now? What can we do? And people will automatically jump at me and they'll say typically a few different things. Firstly, they'll say, well, if I have no expectations, then should I be fine with accepting crap? Let people walk all over me? Not aim for excellence, which is how I've been successful previously? And usually I respond, it's not so black and white. It's not all or nothing. I do like to think of expectations using the Goldilocks principle. You don't want to have no expectations. You don't want to have rigid expectations. You want to have them just right. So we can talk about some of the things that you can do to try to bridge the gap between reality and expectations. And the first one is to practice acceptance. The first step is acknowledging reality doesn't always align with expectations. But that's reality. No matter how much you fight it, how unfair it is what it is. And by accepting what it is rather than fighting it, we can reduce suffering. Now, next, we can also try to reframe disappointments. When things don't go as planned, can you ask yourself, well, what can I learn from this at least? Shifting your perspective really allows you to grow from the experience instead of getting stuck in the suffering. And I know this one can be a hard one, and it almost feels like a lame one of somebody saying to you, try to make the best of it, find the positive. But sometimes I do like to ask myself, well, what are the alternatives? What can I control? The only thing I can truly control is my response. And often, if I try to take care of my nervous system, if I exercise a lot of self-compassion for my struggles, I can get to a place where I'm regulated, and then it is easier to try to reframe things. Sometimes I need some extra time to do that and an extra dose of self-compassion. And by essentially doing this, we are building resilience. When you understand and befriend your nervous system, you become better equipped to handle the unexpected. It's like you're building a stronger immune system. And one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we're doing things on a daily basis to take care of our nervous system is so that we can have the capacity to handle all the ups and downs that life throws our way. This awareness of our nervous system really allows you to recover from disappointments a little bit more quickly and to adapt to more of life's unpredictability. We become more flexible. And as you've probably heard me say, a healthy nervous system is a flexible nervous system. Which leads me to the next point, that we need to allow room for flexibility. We need to recognize that life is unpredictable and building flexibility into your expectations. It's okay to have a vision, but be willing to adjust if things don't go as planned. And we'll come back to this in a second. We also need to try to manage expectations in relationships. Sometimes we're disappointed because our reality did not meet our expectations, but we never communicated our expectations. So you want to ensure that you're communicating your expectations clearly and asking other people about theirs. And I talked more about sharing expectations of what we need when somebody is listening to us. And you can go back to episode 153 and listen to that one. It's called Different Kinds of Listening. Because often disappointment comes from unspoken expectations that the other person has no clue about. And we are allowed to make requests, to make asks. It's okay. You don't have to be a doormat and not share what you need, but you don't want to give away your power either. If you do not meet my expectations, then I'm completely destroyed, is not the place you want to be. If everything is riding on this one outcome, we probably need to have more flexibility than that. But we also get to keep our power and decide what are our non-negotiables. There may be some expectations that we have that we don't want to give up. So what do you do about that? Well, if you can change your reality, then that's what you can do. Maybe you had the expectation for a partner not to cheat, and then they cheat. You don't have to accept that. You can decide that actually that was a reasonable expectation and it is non-negotiable. So for me, this is over. Where you give away your power is if you expect that the reality will change or the other person has to change. It would be great if they did, but often they don't. And then you get to decide what you need and if you want to keep your expectations. Next, you want to celebrate the journey. Remember, it's not about reaching the destination. It's about appreciating the journey along the way and celebrating the small wins, the unexpected twists along the way, and celebrating when you are able to be flexible. Celebration teaches your nervous system to feel safer. And then lastly, this is a super helpful one, I think. You want to shift from having expectations to intentions. Instead of expecting a specific outcome, expecting a situation to turn out a certain way, focus on how you want to show up in the situation. Set an intention on how you want to show up. Now, we often use intention and expectation interchangeably, but they do have distinct impacts on how we experience life, particularly when we're talking about the nervous system. So I think of an intention like being present and setting a purposeful direction. I can focus on how I want to be in a given moment, certain action or relationship, regardless of the outcome. And intentions are really rooted in the present, and they do allow for flexibility and flow. On the other hand, expectations, I think, are much more outcome focused. It's a belief or assumption that something will happen in a specific way or they should happen in a certain way. And expectations are often tied to specific results and outcomes. And when they're unmet, they can lead to that disappointment or frustration and stress that we talked about. So how does this all play out in your nervous system? Well, intentions, they tend to create a sense of safety and grounding. They are present focused. They can foster curiosity, openness, and acceptance, which means you're not going to be activated. Whereas, as I said earlier, expectations, they can actually trigger a stress response, especially when the expectations don't get met, which can cause the body to really shift into this activated state and lead to activated feelings of anxiety and frustration and disappointment. The nervous system will perceive unmet expectations as threats. And so it's going to be activating your stress response over and over and over again. So it is all about really what zone you are in and what is fueling you. Setting intentions is so much more helpful because it does keep you grounded in the present moment. It does allow for a sense of control over your responses, regardless of the external outcomes. And setting intentions or even hopes can promote a mindset of growth and curiosity, making it easier to adapt to changes and challenges. Whereas the expectations, they're tied to more rigid thinking. There is only one way, and usually it's my way. And this can narrow your experience and really cause you unnecessary stress and suffering. So, a couple of examples. An intention can be something like, I intend to be open and curious in this session. And that will allow you to adapt and engage in the moment regardless of how other people respond. And the nervous system remains calm and regulated because there's no fixed outcome that it's waiting for. But an expectation could be, this session will go smoothly and everyone will agree with me. And if things don't go as planned, the nervous system might get triggered, which will then trigger that stress and the frustration. Another intention could be, I intend to approach my workout with kindness and listen to my body. And so that really fosters a sense of self-compassion. It creates a positive and a much more stress-free experience. Versus an expectation, I must lift more weight than I did last week. Well, if you fall short, then feelings of failure or frustration might arise. Your nervous system may get activated into a stress response. So those are a couple little examples. So the shift is the fuel behind what you're looking for, and the compassion and the focus on the presence. How can you bring more intentions into your life? Well, you can do that by doing things like starting your day with an intention. Each morning, asking yourself, how do I want to show up today? And focusing then on qualities like patience, kindness, curiosity, rather than on the outcomes of the day. And you may even want to set an intention to drop rigid expectations. When you notice yourself clinging to an expectation, pause and reframe it into an intention. Instead of thinking, I expect this project to be perfect, try saying instead, I intend to do my best and learn from the process. Another thing that you can do is you can practice more mindfulness. Engage in practices that anchor you in the present, such as deep breathing and meditation or even doodling. These practices help regulate your nervous system and keep you grounded in your intentions. And then back to celebrations. You can celebrate intentions, not just outcomes. Acknowledge when you've shown up with intention, even if the outcome wasn't what you hoped for. And this reinforces the idea that your value isn't tied to specific results. Remember, your value is in being, not in doing. Your value has nothing to do with your outcomes. And lastly, self-compassion. You can't go anywhere without it. Your nervous system needs and wants your self-compassion. When expectations aren't met, offer yourself kindness and understanding instead of that criticism that we usually go to. And this will help calm your nervous system and foster resilience. So there you have it, some of the pros and cons of expectations. They can be both a guide and a trap, a motivator and a stressor. And the key is to use them as a tool to move forward and not let them hold you back. And that's what you have to be asking yourself. Is this helping me move forward, or is this keeping me stuck and holding me back? Remember, you do have the power to shape your experience from shifting from having the rigid expectations to creating more fluid intentions. I hope this is helpful, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Building Resilience podcast. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about managing stress, building resilience, and leading a more purposeful life, then make sure we're connected on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.leahdavidsonlifecoaching.com/newsletter. Looking forward to connecting.